So actually, I don't know much about like how you got started on this path of self exploration, and I know that you have a lot of different modalities and practices in your life. So where did this all come from for you, man?
Sure. My origin story when it comes to, I think, things like conscious perspective and also some of the fun topics like aliens, UFOs, multidimensional consciousness. Um,
The fun stuff.
Honestly, like 5 years ago, that was not on my mind. I did always have a bit of a seeker perspective. I grew up with religion, with non-denominational Christianity was the modality, the form of study to ask, the larger questions about life and spirituality. So that was my background basis. But it was at the end of high school when I was listening to a podcast called Mysterious Universe, um, and they talk about paranormal phenomena and specifically the UFO phenomenon. And so after listening to that topic, I realized that there was something to it. And basically, I was just challenged to update my worldview. So that was like level one inspiration for this strange new world of, I guess, perception. How we perceive
Yeah.
reality,
hmm
where we stand in it. And then let's see, that was also an introduction into a bit of a new form of philosophy because in the UFO phenomenon, there's a lot of talk from sometimes from people that say they were abducted or say they have telepathic contact with extraterrestrial races. And a lot of the messaging that they say is that these beings are telling them somewhat spiritual lessons, things about taking care of the planet, things about not being at war with each other, trying to prevent nuclear war. So there's this other kind of spiritual side to the UFO phenomenon that also has to do with consciousness,
Yeah.
and the nature of our perception of reality. So it was that mixed up with my introduction to flotation therapy, which is sensory deprivation tanks. And
Mm.
that's what got me interested in meditation, which then sort of sparked me looking into the Eastern perspective on personal growth through mind, body, spirit practices.
hmm So you've probably come to realize that it's all related, right? UFOs, aliens, ghosts, meditation, Christianity, in one way or the other, you've probably come to realize that it's all related.
Absolutely. All these things, I guess, make us question our place within it all and also challenge us to act and think in a bunch of new ways. Um, and I'll tell you, it wasn't always like super easy. Sometimes I think a lot of people that get into these subjects, you can get jaded pretty fast. And I think we've talked about this before. It's just like it's like opening up a door and you feel like there's a lot to it, but it's hard to get any truth to it because it's very obscure information. It's not widely known. No one's out there really proving it. It feels like there's no proof, but you're just so challenged by it. And like how to actually take action on that and how to let that transform your life in a positive way is actually probably the biggest thing I've taken away from I think taking on that like really progressive seeker mentality, trying all these new ways of perception when it comes to like alternative health methods and the way you think, even a sensory deprivation tank, getting in there and being silent with yourself is like this weird, just like it's a mirror. It's a mirror, but it's not like talking to you. It's a silent reflection, but yeah, there's like that was one of the things that was so, I think, profound to me. The introduction to meditation is that like how much can you really learn about, or how much can you learn from doing absolutely nothing?
A lot. That's funny, man. Yeah, I think the problem is the countless modalities and practices and rabbit holes one can go down. Um, it's definitely all connected, and um, the problem is there's too many charlatans that are involved when in whatever the rabbit hole may be that one is diving down. So there is a truth uniting all of the things, like I said, aliens, Christianity, meditation, the whole gamut, right? There is some kind of underlying truth, but within that you have to sift through the shit first, right? You have to see what isn't real to know what is real. And I think meditation helps one align to the realness and easily see through the bullshit. At least from my personal view, because being able to do meditation, like you said, you do gain a lot of insight into yourself in the world just by simply closing the eyes and breathing for a little bit. It seems from an outside perspective, it doesn't really make sense, right? Like, how do you get answers? But there is a sense of like, I don't know. It seems like inner discernment that comes from doing regular meditation, like some kind of guidance, and whether it's from guidance from another entity, yourself, the same thing, one could say, but there is some kind of guidance that comes from a regular meditation practice, and especially doing the sensory deprivation tank. That's like meditation on steroids. That's like really, really meditating. And yeah, I used to do it weekly, so I know the benefits of it. Every Friday, I would go and do a sensory deprivation tank session, and it's extremely beneficial. I would highly recommend that to everybody. But yeah, man, I don't really know where else to say. It's all connected in one way or the other, and ultimately, it's all connected to ourself. That's the thing. It's like all of these truths are just reflections upon ourself. So it's like being able. It's rare to be able to find someone like you that is connected to the UFO phenomena and connected to Christianity and the likes of Urantia, and being able to connect the dots, and then also have this like outward look, this outward exploration, but then also have the inward exploration. That's pretty rare, and I think that's actually like a true yogi, to be honest with you, like one that is able to do that and go back and forth between the modalities. Because you have the crazy UFO people where it's like they're a little too far out and you don't know what to believe about them, and then you sometimes even have like the yogis that are just like a little too into themselves, if that makes sense, a little too in the ethers. So it's like you got to be able to blend the two worlds together to figure out that they're actually just one world that one can find. But to be able to find that in a person is rare. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're one of the real ones.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
wow. There's a couple things that I was thinking as you were speaking there. So yeah, meditation, especially if you're going to get into these strange topics, like I absolutely recommend a personal practice of meditation, and you're going to have to discover for yourself like why you want to spend time in silence. For me, there was also alongside an interest in wanting to know about UFOs. I more wanted to know like who am I? What is my purpose? How do I have like continuous joy? Because all religions
Yeah,
talk about joy and love, and so I
that's what it's
had
all about.
values. Yeah, I had those values, but now what I realize is that true, like the inner part of religion, true religion, inner religion, your experience of the divine is really based upon how much you can actually live out the action of love, because love has
That's
the
it.
answer. You,
Hmm.
you have the answer to love, like how you should react in a situation, but like your programmed reaction is absolutely not that. And it has all these levels to it. So let me step back a minute. Meditation, establishing a baseline for your own perception is, if you do that, one thing alongside looking into these strange topics, like you are going to appear much more intelligent than almost anyone else in the field. And you see like people that talk about these subjects where sometimes it just seems like they're off the rocker, and it's something also in the spiritual field, and sometimes I call it the psychosis portion of the seeker phase.
Yeah,
And it's just this it's that feeling that you're in the matrix, and you think the answer is to just tell everyone about all these crazy ideas and like alternate perception, and like every person you interact with, you want to just like break down the way that they think so they can think different. But like there's yeah, the I don't know. I found that you have to go on basically like a law of inspiration. You have to find a way to inspire people, but not just like unload all your questions about reality. Now
Yeah,
I love this podcast because that's what it's about. Everyone that comes on here has an agreement to to dissect reality and like ask the big questions.
that's it, man.
But yeah, there is a new. I think that there is a new opportunity for the Eastern philosophers and the Western thinking to basically meet in the middle and create very action based individuals who have that greater spiritual perspective that is known for the Eastern philosophies. So that internal and external seeking, and what I notice is that sometimes in the spiritual world, it's like the philosophy gets so loose, and it has to do with that all is one philosophy. But like it it creates a difficulty in figuring out how to actually act that out, and that's the Western thinking. It's the logical step by step process. Like this is what I need to be doing in order to actually survive in a world, a time space evolutionary planet that
Yeah,
has like resource requirements. I got to make money. I got
yeah.
to XYZ. So that's where I definitely want to fit in, and not just kind of try and take on some sort of Eastern yogi ego, that you see sometimes. You're just like,
Yeah, exactly. It seems like a blend between masculine and feminine. Like putting it very simply, what you described is like the Eastern. It seems like they more so go on a feminine exploration, when the Western is more hyper masculine. And I think obviously a perfect blend between the two is the way to go, and I think is the way of the future and the way that a human being should actually conduct themselves. I mean, there's no should and shouldn't. So I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do, but I feel like that's the right way to go. It's like, yeah, figure out the all is oneness, but then enact that in one's life and actually bring about that energy in one's life in whatever way that they create it. That's the basic premise of it. Um, yeah, I mean that's the goal is work from love, create from love. But first you have to find that within oneself. You have to have the all is oneness. Like you have to go through that and find that, and then bring it back into the Western sense. It's like, I don't know. What comes first? I guess us just living in the Western world, we're already exposed to the hypermasculinity, the dominator culture, I guess one could say. So it's very important for us to be exposed to Eastern ideals of the inner path, and then don't get just sucked into the inner path. I mean, you could if you want. Like I said, there's no should or shouldn'ts, but I think that the true middle way, as the Buddha described, is like figure out that inner essence and then bring it into the world, especially the Western world. We need a lot more of that in the Western world. But I think it's happening, man. I definitely think it's happening. Like the United States and the Western world is getting a lot more grounded, I guess one could say, a lot more grounded in our inner femininity, our divine femininity, which is in turn balancing our divine masculinity as well. It's a balance. It's yin and yang. It's both at the same
mhm,
time. But yeah, man, I think that's what's happening in the world. Is kind of we're just balancing out these inner energies that we have. We're balancing out through the various belief systems throughout the world. We're finding out the true essence between the two, the Western and Eastern. There seems to be like a separate, like a a separation between the two, but they're really actually one. There's really truly only one religion. And I think really what's happening in the world right now is we're finding out the the separateness between the two is actually a lot closer than we think. Look, there's actually a true blend and a true capital T truth between the two modalities, and it really has to do with blending masculine and feminine essences. But yeah,
mhm.
that's up to all of us to be able to find that and act that in our life.
And some of what you were saying about what's happening in America, a blend of masculine and feminine. I think some people watching might try and push back on that because a lot of what happens on the news and people's perspective of America is like our political status and like some of the big like um, social injustices, all these other things. But I actually do think a lot of what this points back to, and if you want to look at something very beautiful happening, is that if you look at the sort of maybe conscious community that probably started back in the 60s era was when the Eastern perspective actually came over because Eastern yogi teachers were like coming from India
Yeah.
And it was
They were
during that
literally
psychedelic
coming here.
revolution,
Yeah.
right? And they were teaching this perspective because I don't know all the reasons behind it. I watched one documentary called Sunseed. I recommend that. But yeah, there was they obviously noticed that there was an opportunity to introduce an Eastern way of thinking and being, and mind, body, spirit, consciousness progression, and personal growth. And it started, that was like a starting point in the West, but it's still growing. And that's why in California, these topics are like much more talked about. They're much more popular. UFOs, meditation, sensory deprivation tanks are all over California and the East Coast, or no, sorry, and the West Coast.
Mhm.
But it's starting to spread. And even now, I see a lot of like business people who are very like Western logical success focused, who are now like kind of turning into, semi spiritual seekers. And not all of them talk in the sort of spiritual lingo, but like you start to see it happening. And it's because of also the spread of mindfulness. And it's amidst a lot of the turmoil and social problems in the world that we're actually challenged to find a better way to express.
Yeah.
And people are being challenged by that. And then they're being pointed towards mindfulness, consciousness, going deep within your mind, and basically re-scrubbing and reprogramming the biases that we've been acting out of just because they were passed on, by the previous generations.
Yeah. So you think it's like this newfound world we're moving toward of mindfulness being incorporated into a lot of people's lives is actually a result of the darkness that we've been living in, and this so-called happiness and love that everyone wishes for is actually it's it's like that yearning is bringing out that need for a different lifestyle in the Western world, and we're using the darkness almost as like saying this is not what we want, right? As a way to say like our suffering is bringing us into a sense of peace, right? And that sense of peace is brought about from the people of the East, the peace in the East, and that's a that's kind of what's happening in the 20th century, right? Is what you're saying is that we've been on this hamster wheel of Western materialism, and I think we're reaching a breaking point at this point in time where that peace is not found in materialism, in the Western way of life, in the dominated culture, one may say, and it's actually found inside. Something that the yogis have found, something that people of the peace of the East has found, and that is the. It's almost like a weird synchronicity that's happening, right? A weird synchronicity that's happening in the 20th century and the 21st century, where like this people are getting fed up, but then also the yogis have made their way in the 60s at this time to bring about almost like as like messengers in a way to like show the people of the West a new way, a different way. But I don't think it's like an accident. It's not a coincidence. It's they were sent here for a reason, like divine timing. This whole newfound lifestyle, I think, was sent here on purpose. I think it was to bring us into that state of peace, so we don't destroy ourselves. Essentially, man, I really think it was just so we don't get so lost that we bring about the destruction of this Western civilization. Because there's a lot that I think the West and America has to offer, like this technology that we're literally using right now, and that anybody's listening to. There's a lot. There's a lot that comes from it that's great, but then it needs a balance. Like it needs like some kind of balance so you don't get sucked into the matrix too much, and you don't lose track of that peace and love and kumbaya-ness that we all yearn for, and really truly how to find that and resonate on that and create from that. So I think that's the purpose of the yogic movement moving into our lives in the 21st century. It's to balance out the physical with the spiritual, one could say, because there's a lot of good that comes from the physical in the materialism of America. I'm not hating on it altogether. It's actually a beautiful thing that we have this kind of technology, that I can talk to you like you're in the same room as me and you're miles away, and that anybody can listen to this conversation, in the future, and from anywhere, pretty much. That's cool to be able to do that. But if we didn't have true mindfulness and able to align oneself, um, to find the truth per se, then we get easily succumb to this technology. And you can see that in a lot of people. You can definitely see that in today's world, man. If you don't have any kind of like guidance that to go within, or any kind of practice really, I mean basic meditation practice, it's so easily one is so easily succumb to this. um it's almost like pressure of the technology. Like it almost is like it sucks us in, man. It's literally addicting. So like I said, it's not a coincidence that I think we have this newfound technology, this newfound way of lifestyle from the technology that we've been granted. And then at the same time, yogis are coming over and showing us how to balance that out. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that's some weird divine timing that they were sent by maybe the aliens. Hey, maybe the aliens sent them over. They say, hey, we can't let the Western world go down that route, down into the darkness a little too much. We need to be able to keep them on some kind of plane of peace, plane of self that they can find and really come back to. Yeah, I think that's kind of what's happening, man. I hope that made sense.
No, for sure. And there's some philosophical, basically stories, legends, myths about. You may have the most popular one when it comes to yogis is that there's like secret palaces and even dimensions in the Himalayas where they're sort of like these utopias. This is also where you get the idea of like Wakanda or an underwater city of Atlantis that's still active, like ancient cities. It's basically like
Shambhala.
this idea that there is sort of breakaway sections of humanity that have some sort of greater knowledge, either technologically or inner knowledge, whether it's about spirituality or just consciousness, accessing the mental realms. And so I don't doubt that there are some very masterful individuals in various parts of the world that have a sort of purview of where they see humanity going. And I know this is true because in the yogic perspective and the yogic texts, they have, I think, what's called the yugas, which is this description of the cycles of planetary evolution, and specifically with the cycles that humanity goes through. And I haven't dived deep into those texts. Most of my interaction with the yogic perspective is with personal mind, body, spirit practices. But I know that exists. And I know that from their perspective, this is a natural cycle of evolutionary planets. And so if you want to gain a sort of optimist view on what is happening, because a lot of times in the spiritual community, there's a lot of hate on material progression. And the reason that exists is because we see the sort of fallout when we progress materially, but not responsibly when it comes to our morals and how we choose to use it. And that's the case where it comes to like atomic weapons, where it's like, the technology itself of accessing reality at an atomic level and being able to, split things apart, put them back together, has power for great destruction or great building. We see the atomic bomb, and we also have the nuclear power plants. And like both of them are still dangerous. We're still trying to stabilize, nuclear source of power for energy reproduction. But like a lot of times we focus in, and I think this is probably because of the survival instinct of the animalistic part of our nature, where it's like that fight or flight response is like survive. When we see an accident happen, when we see destruction from a potentially good technology, we often just want to cut it off because it's very painful. But as time goes by, we sort of re-bring that up, and maybe some technology that we've discovered in the past that we weren't really ready to handle morally and socially, that's going to resurface later at a time when the inner, I guess, the consciousness of man is capable of using that for good. So I see these as cycles, and this helps me gain a positive perspective on the world and not go into a sort of negative, very negative opinion about the world. Because if you look so deep at the problems and you're not the one directly in the midst of solving them, you feel like the problem's just overwhelmed. And so from an Eastern perspective, it's like, okay, recognize these worldly problems. Even like allow yourself to suffer in a sense for the world. Like if you need to uh sort of actually cry, because you see the suffering of your fellow man, like you need to express that. Sure, you can't directly solve all the problems going on, but what you can do is start with yourself, and it's by changing your reactions that you actually begin to start to be better. You start to be better than those who have come before us, and as long as you're being better than the failures of the past, you are having a positive effect. And so trying to find your niche on how to express that, I think is very important if you want to encourage and inspire people and keep yourself from that spiritual dystopianism.
Spiritual dystopianism. Yeah. Yeah. It's tough because there's so much dystopian influence within our world, but that's why we have the practice is to be able to find out what's true. And, that's all just noise, and that's all just bullshit of Kali Yuga that we're living through. And that's the goal for every yogi, every person that's on the path is to use that almost as a catalyst to be able to find that within themselves and then truly you know resonate on that, truly create from that, and truly continually connect with that essence within oneself to know and remember that it's all bullshit. No matter what happens during this dark age of Kali Yuga, it's all bullshit. That's what I believe, and that's the only thing we can do, man. We can't save the world. I'm not going to save the world. You're not. Anyone that's listening is not going to save the world. The only thing how we can save the world is we save ourselves. That's truly how we go about this and bring it about this new yuga of Sat Yuga, which is the golden age, or the kingdom of heaven, one may say, is we find that kingdom of heaven within ourselves, work on our own suffering, and get through that. And that's the only way we can do it, man. And I'm putting it very simply, the way that I see about going about that is just continually remembering that essence that's within all of us. You can call it God, you can call it love, source, supreme, infinite consciousness. There's a lot of different beliefs, but it's within all of us, man. And I think that's really the key to go about living in this dark age that I think is, it's not going to get any lighter anytime soon. It's to just constantly remember whatever you got to do. Simplest uh the most simple and effective way, in my opinion, is meditation, for sure, and you can probably agree. Just simply meditate, find out that essence, that it's kind of like an internal compass to direct oneself. You direct yourself within, and then it directs yourself without, and that's really simply how I see it, man. All you got to do. I mean, there's a lot more that comes with that territory. There's a lot more to create from that essence, but it's a really, putting it very simply, man, a two-step process. Go within, and then you bring it without. And that's all we can do, man. Work on yourself. Keep working on yourself in whatever way that you got to do it, Like I said, meditation is effective, but maybe you write a book, maybe you paint a picture, maybe you make music, maybe you're just spending time with your kids, you're being in the moment with your kids, whatever it is, whatever brings us into this present sacred moment, whatever just takes you out of the noise, takes you into the moment, and in the moment, you'll find that there is beauty, there is that sense of peace, and there is that golden age that, well, you can touch upon, and that someday maybe humanity will reach. But it's just about finding that golden kernel within one's heart, and staying with that, remembering that the golden kernel of peace.
For sure. There's a certain amount of momentum that has been built by the past actions of humanity that
Mm-hmm.
will result, or if you want to say manifest, that also is the case. It's really a matter of cause and effect, and
Karma.
it happens it's karma, and it's both on the physical plane, but also the plane of thought, you could say, because our thoughts and our motivations as human beings, they form our actions. So I'm not super deep into this topic, but when we talk about our management of our natural environment, planetary environment, the greenery around us, um, it's a closed system. So as we introduce all these different modes of managing the world, it's going to try and balance itself out. And so, environmentally speaking, I think that we have probably made an influence that we can't simply back out of just by changing our consciousness.
Yeah.
Changing our consciousness will create a baseline for the next generations on how they will begin to act against it. But like some things built over multiple hundreds of years are going to take hundreds of years or 1,000 years to truly turn around. And in the meantime, there might be some disasters that occur, based on the direction and the momentum that we built up from those last couple, hundred of years. And so realizing that your goal as an individual is not necessarily to like change the thing that's going to take multiple hundreds of years, but like I think in the spiritual community, there's a really good perspective where it's like if even one person learns something from this or is served or is inspired by my interaction, my going on this podcast, then it was worth it. And if you can actually take on that thinking, you can find a way to inspire someone else every day, and that is enough to build your own sort of momentum. And you'll see the way that you can also transform other people by having your own sort of spotless mind, spotless consciousness. After sifting through your own sort of inner seeking, you really are like, I don't know. I noticed that in the spiritual community and the ability to inspire is like, it's like from a core inner perspective versus, it's the teach a man to fish versus give a man a fish.
Yeah.
But also from a spiritual perspective and like from a point of like religion, it's like, you have to let people take their own journey.
Yeah.
I think I always had a bit of a perfectionist attitude, and I also like teaching things that I've learned. I've always been good at instructing, but something that I've learned is that if you don't really leave room for like people to breathe, if you want to like go in and do stuff for them or like overly critique them, it's not actually inspiring them to change their own sort of inner engineering.
Yeah.
And
That's all
finding
concept
that
created.
right, finding that perfect balance of interaction with other people. The way I put it is that I like to become a master of like setting up these mirrors and reflections. So I set up these maybe metaphysical or mirrors of thought in the way that I interact with people and I talk. And just by sort of entering my thought sphere, they end up looking in these mirrors and they see something different about themselves. And it's based on how I actually see them. Your ability to exercise non-judgment is much more like powerful and inspiring than you might think.
Yeah. And I think that's because we're connected telepathically. Oh, am I
I
there? Are
lost
you
you for a
breaking up?
sec.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay, cool. So what I was saying is I think that's because we're connected telepathically. One can find that, it's all one mind in a way where there is truly no separation. So when you do change your internal, I guess your internal thoughts about a person or a certain situation that you're in with a person, they can kind of pick up on it. If you're truly like in that non-judgmental state, truly loving the person, being present, you don't want them to be any different. They'll be able to pick up on that for sure. Um, so it's interesting that you do that and you recognize that because I find that as well, man. And not from an egotistical point. Like if one can do it, this is the trick. It's like if one can do it from a point of like actually being non-judgmental and not doing it because it's like I want to be non-judgmental today. It's like not from a point of like being the non-judgmental guy, like truly resonating on that non-judgment of another in the moment. That creates a beautiful moment. And if two people are on that, that's a very beautiful moment. It really just comes down to, like I said, because I think in interactions we can read each other's mind, and people don't really know that. But if one person knows that we are connected and you truly are, present with somebody, it opens up it it really, a better way to put it is it dissolves the
Expression,
boundaries. What'd you say?
definitely. It opens up a free expression, a
Yeah,
much freer
exactly.
expression.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have these like boundaries and defense mechanisms built up. Even if like you see people that you call your friends, right? Just naturally you have these unconscious defense mechanisms up. So I think it's, yeah, the best, like, getting back to it, man, the best thing we can do is work on ourselves so that we don't have these unconscious defense mechanisms, so that when we are in the world interacting with others, we're truly allowing not only yourself to express freely, but the other person to express. And it's a beautiful back and forth. And it's a beautiful back and forth experience, and that allows for a beautiful moment. And it's because we're all connected. It's really what it comes down to. I think in the future, as time goes on, we're going to start to realize that telepathy and that connection. And we're going to get, as people go more and more within themselves, we're going to start to reach almost like a singularity. Not with technology, we can get into that if we want to go down that route, but we're actually almost like approaching this a weird singularity between, time and space, between each other. I can sometimes even feel it on podcasts with people where I'm not even in the same room as them. I feel like we're creating this one mind in the moment that isn't even like literally, it's like non-local, right? I think that's where we're going, man. I think we're slowly and slowly, as people go within themselves, it's unlocking the connections that we innately have. And whether you're aware of it or not, I think we're all connected telepathically. There's this one mind. This is one unconscious mind that's kind of happening right now, right here and now. We're all connected. There's this weird energy that's all connecting us. Just the simple fact of like we're all conscious, like we're all the same consciousness. That in itself, to me, is like that's the one mind. But there's layers to it. It seems like there's layers. Um, yeah.
If you
Go
if
ahead.
you want a sort of logical analogy to understand that whole one planetary mind concept, I like to think of it like this: as a planet, we say human species have the most complex, brain structure for information processing, and this is partly how we think, we became, the sort of dominant species, creating civilizations, and so think of I don't know, I guess think of the human brain, which uses all these individual neurons, firing at these different rates and synchronization pulses, and working through this concept, complex biological computer system that is your body.
Mm-hmm.
Now just expand that same sort of thing up to a planetary level, and now each human person, even all the animals as well, are also like individual neurons in the brain of Earth.
Yeah.
And if you think that this is just an analogy, but it's not actually scientific, I would actually disagree, because we are also wireless transceivers, and we're pushing out sort of wireless waves, from our thoughts. We also do have the electromagnetic patterns. We're all familiar with Wi-Fi. Maybe not all of us understand how we encode digital information on the electromagnetic spectrum. I learned a little bit about that from the world of audio, but that was very profound to me, because you have companies now like Neuralink, which most people know as being associated with Elon Musk, who is developing brain-computer interfaces to interpret the electrical signals in the brain, and interpret how thought translates into these electrical signals, and how those signals represent real action in the body. And so you have something like if you there's video where they installed the Neuralink in a monkey, and the monkey knows how to play like Pong with the joystick. And so they plug in the controller normally, and so the monkey is just playing this. And now they're recording the brain signals in the monkey, and they have to figure out how does the brain image correlate to the physical motor movement of the monkey's hand. And once they map that out, now what they do is unplug the controller, and now instead of controlling the Pong game from the controller, they basically set up a wireless controller. So their scanner is reading the brain signals, but it's pinging the computer wirelessly, telling it the controls. The monkey might still be doing the thing, but then they take the controller away, and the monkey might figure out that they can do it just by like thinking about it. Now, I haven't seen that example yet where the monkey like has stopped moving their hand. In the video example, they just have the controller unplugged to demonstrate that they're actually having the monkey control the game based on thoughts, and it's the electromagnetic electromagnetic mapping from understanding what the synapses, how those connect to the motor movements. So these are some of the technologies that explain how thought can be sort of measurable in this wireless fashion. And so I actually happen to wonder, in communication, human communication, there's tons of extra information about the subtle interactions of human, like face to face, whether it comes to like facial expressions, tonality of voice. All those things are like things that humans pick up on, some humans better than other humans when it comes to the subtle interaction with other humans. But I think there's another level to it where it's like, if my thoughts are being encoded on my brainwaves, which they can be read by EEGs. I don't doubt that other sensitive individuals can actually pick up on something about my state of mind, even if it's just from a basic level of like, what brainwave state am I in? If I'm in a peaceful, sort of receptive theta state, and somebody was sensitive enough to sense that subliminally, they might walk in a room and they could somehow sense my peace or my lack of extreme thoughts bouncing everywhere. Or you go into a room and you sense the busyness, but it's not always from just seeing somebody physically moving around. If you're in a room and everyone's sitting still, but the thoughts are extreme, it seems like an extreme situation. Maybe a traumatic event just happened and people are in shock. Like, you can kind of sense that. Now, we consider it to be like, oh, it's because I'm seeing something about them. But I think that there's these other subliminal communications that do come from either wireless transmission on the electromagnetic spectrum, but also, as I understand it, from I guess from that position of like telepathy, or they call it extrasensory perception. There is another level to this. It's not purely just electromagnetic waves. There's something else that we don't quite know how to measure, and I would say it's probably at risk of entering the quantum woo kind of sector. I think some of these measurements won't be possible until we do have stable quantum computers. And the reason for that, I think that we lose. So the neurons in your brain, they also have a quantum scale to them. You can zoom in past the molecular level and see the quantum interaction. But when we digitize it, we basically, I think it's called truncation. We basically truncate the data at the binary level, at the electricity level, from just measuring positive and negative charges of electrons. So we're losing a lot of the data. And so if we can zoom in further on the quantum scale, we're going to be able to see the physics operating at closer, I don't know, at a higher microscopic perspective. And this is actually why this whole quantum science world is connected with consciousness, and why the spiritual community has sort of piggybacked and hijacked some of the very scientific topics and made them into these like talking points that honestly most of the time just sound kind of crazy, just like buzzwords. But the reason that connection exists is because there are some experiments that have to do with measuring measuring the effect of human thought on like quantum number generators.
Mm.
And there's some institute that has some really good studies and some technology and they basically show that uh, an individual in a lab setting in scientific method using the scientific method, they've shown that a quantum number generator can be like skewed um, based on, I guess, somebody sort of thinking about it going in a certain direction, and they do that by measuring what is beyond chance. And so I don't know how to explain it, but maybe we find an article. I've seen it in some documentaries, and so I just make the connection that we're beginning to measure human thought and consciousness on a bigger microscopic scale, and I think that's what's going to pull back the curtain between extrasensory perception.
Yeah, man. Well, I get that. So, damn. Yeah, I'm interested in those quantum experiments. So pretty much, it's like there's a certain, is it supposed to be random? Like there's a random number generator,
Mm-hmm.
but they're using a quantum computer.
Yeah, and it's because so like a random number generator that's just using binary, it's like there's still some sort of algorithm. There's still a sort of mathematical equation on how it's spitting out random numbers. So like you could almost predict it's almost not truly random because it's using the randomness within, I guess, the electron spectrum,
Yeah.
which if you were smart enough you could predict the random number that's going to be predicted because it's actually operating on a formula based on a truncated piece of reality, which is
Mm.
just the electron or the
Yeah.
electron
There's no
spectrum.
such thing as randomness, essentially. Is that
Right, it's
you
all
can't program randomness. That doesn't make any sense because it came from
right,
somewhere. It came from some kind of algorithm. Even though
some
it
sort of
is perceived.
constant.
Yeah, exactly. The constant of binary, which isn't random. But when you get into the quantum realm, that's when it gets trippy, right? When you can. So how does that, from what you understand, how does like somebody's thoughts affect that? Like, are they near the computer? Are they hooked up like somehow on their body? Or are they just literally near it thinking of a certain number? Like, do you remember or know how that works?
Okay, so there's some device that you can buy that I think that this one of these institutes made, and I know I have it bookmarked somewhere, but um, it's like it's like a handheld device, and it's got four colored lights on it,
Mm-hmm.
like red, green, yellow, blue, um, and it's just cycling those individual colors. Um, but it's using, I guess, a quantum number generator, which again, I don't know enough, but something, yeah, the number generation to program the randomness is different than like a standard computer. So then the user will like just have the device next to them, and the experiment is that they think, I guess they think about what color they want to happen, and they'll do like, okay, in this 10 seconds, pick a color. Now in this 10 seconds, pick another color. In this 10 seconds, pick a color. And what happens is that the colors happening on the device begin to match up a certain amount with what the user is thinking. Now, because there's only four colors, you say, okay, there's a 25% chance that they're going to guess the color that's going to show up next. So that's not influence. That's random mechanical chance. But what happens is that the synchronization happens more than 25% of the time, and it
Mm.
goes up to like 80% or something. And
Oh,
so that goes beyond, I guess, like the mathematical chance that you're just guessing what's going to come next. And if you can do that consistently, then that is a real like scientific measurement method that you are synchronizing with the next upcoming color, without knowing what it's going to be. You're synchronizing it with it, 80% or 90% of the time, uh, when that's far beyond the mathematical chance.
yeah. Interesting. Whew. Wow, man. That's the world we're moving toward. Quantum singularity, bro. Quantum singularity. That's a buzzword right there. I'm gonna throw that out there. But It seems like that's what's happening, man. I mean, how would you describe what singularity is, right? I think that's an interesting topic, and that's a definitely a popular word that's being thrown around in today's world, especially with the likes of AI art and chat, GPT. So it seems like that's where we're going, right? So my definition, putting it very simply, is singularity. It's like computers are allowing us to like, thy will be done. Thy will be done is almost instant. It's like if you think it, it's happening, and computers are allowing that to happen. Like if one, it's bridging the gap between the manifestation and the creation, and computers are just allowing us to create, and the creation to be like this, right? That's just at a very simple sense. So how would you, let's go into like singularity a little more, right? Like how would you describe and how do you foresee the world being a little bit differently as computers and technology is more incorporated with us? Are we going to approach that? Are we approaching a world where it's like literally you think it and it becomes, you know?
Mm. So yeah, so I mean, singularity kind of matches with the term oneness. So singular. So
Literally. Yeah.
really, what we're doing with technology is, and also one of Elon Musk's intentions with Neuralink is to decrease the interaction time and the user barrier between your mind and your thoughts, like actually interacting and completing an action with a computer. So so right now we use our phones and our computers through like a 2D visual interface.
Yeah.
I'm using a keyboard to type the letters. I'm using this mouse, and all of that. It takes X amount of time to actually have an intention, and then move your hands, and then type, and then you might make a mistake.
Yeah.
And so, if you can map the motor movements of yourself typing on a keyboard, and then you can figure out how to keep your hands still and still have that same sort of exact electromagnetic thought pattern. They're doing typing with your thoughts. Right now, they do that with, they do this successfully with, they'll have you move the mouse, and they'll have a virtual keyboard on the screen. And so they can have you move the mouse on the screen with your thoughts, because they're mapping it to some sort of motor movement. And so they're going to map it. They're basically finding a carrier wave to map that data to, and then they
Wow.
have you like, oh, think about moving your hand, or they'll map it to the motor movement of your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so so getting back to that singularity topic, it's that like as we decrease the barrier of human interaction with computers, as we decrease the barrier of stabilizing quantum computers, um, these things become enmeshed. And the more technology we take on to help us manage the world's resources, the more we drive electric cars and rely on these systems of energy, of technology, it becomes singular to the point that when some of these things break, it's very detrimental to society because we've relied on that for like our baseline of civilization. There are, I don't know, like food production systems, the agriculture that you have, the transport system to get those goods and services to other people. Like that underlying structure allows us to have grocery stores where we can get our food, so we don't have to create our own garden. Um,
Yeah.
but when that breaks, that severely impacts a population's ability to access food.
Hmm.
So, the singularity idea is just like how, and meshing all these systems, how do we do it responsibly and not create too many dependencies that can really like break us if it falls out? I don't know, but you're also talking about the AI singularity concept, right?
Yeah. I think it's, yeah, it all blends. It's hard because it's like uncharted territory, so it's really hard for us to visualize where it's gonna go because we don't have any experience to really draw from other than the technology that we already have. But I think the technology, the future technology, is taking us into a world that is, it's so foreign. It's it's hard for us to really. We can kind of get glimpses of it, but I think it's so foreign that it's hard for us to really conceptualize because I don't think humanity has really ever been at this point. But it seems like, right? It seems like we're just becoming one with this technology, and it's almost becoming like literally another appendage, but also like another mental appendage as well. Like it's becoming a part of our consciousness, but it's also becoming part of our body. It's one and the same. Like there's not those two things are going to happen at the same time. And I don't know how the blend is, where it comes from. Is it Neuralink? It's just like there's so much happening. It's really hard to create a model of the future, at least in this moment, right? Because there is, like you said, there's the AI aspect where it's like literally AI is creating for us, but then you have the aspect of, like you said, where it goes into our databases and it goes into our food management systems. Like that's also important too. At a collective, AI is changing us, but then also at a personal level, AI is changing us. But I think ultimately that's all going to connect, and that's truly singularity. It's like you got this. It's just like this web, this giant, giant, unfathomable mycelial web of silicon. Ideally, maybe not even silicon in the future, right? It's just this giant web of technology that is intertwined in our life and all different facets, whether it's mentally, whether it's like literally our lighting system in our house, or everything, our fridge being connected to the internet, or us being able to move the cursor on the screen. I think that's kind of the essence of singularity, is that like literally our whole life is going to be intertwined with this technological beast that we are creating, and there's no going back. We can kind of see it already now in today's world, but in 10 years, 15, 20 years from now, they're going to look back at us and the technology that we're using as like the Stone Ages. Because I think the future is, like I said, it's so unfathomable, but I think it's inevitable as well. I think it's inevitable that like our phones are literally going to be a part of our bodies. There's a lot of people, right, that would say, "Oh, I don't want that. I'm not going to do that." They're going to be like the ones, the ones that are going to be stuck with their phones. Like, I don't want that in my body. It's like, no, you say that now, but when I think you see the capabilities that this will grant you, there's not going to be any other choice. It's like I mean, have you ever met anybody without a smartphone in the United States? I'm going to say no. Most likely you have not met anybody without a smartphone, right? And there's probably people 20 years ago, if you would bring up the idea of a smartphone, they're like, dude, I don't need a smartphone. I don't need a phone all the time. I just got one at my house. Why do I do? I just got a pay phone. I'll just use the pay phone, right? Fast forward 20 years, you got a smartphone in your pocket at all times. And you probably have a tablet as well. And you probably have a TV that's connected to the internet as well. And, various computers around the house. So fast forward 20 years from now, 100% most likely people are going to be hooked up their body into the matrix, man, into the into the singularity that we are moving toward. And there's a lot of good that can come from it, for sure. I think there's so much good that can come from it, right? So much good. But then on the other side of the coin, I think there's also a lot of darkness that can come from it. There's a lot of subversion that can come from it. I don't know. What do you think? Do you see it as more of a positive for humanity getting linked up to the technology? Or do you see it as more of a negative, or there's no, it's kind of in the middle?
Sure. I think all the technological advancements, I try to see them from a neutral position, because it's always the human motivations that decide how we use them. So
Yeah.
if you want to take an optimist view, and what I'm hoping to see from AI developments is that AI, machine learning, big data, these terms that you might be hearing, popping up now, it's really presenting it can present a lot of new solutions. So I would like to see AI applied to managing resources at scale, basically like operations. We are the CEOs of Earth, being the dominant species. And so we want to keep this system running so that we can live our lives, support our families, and create an environment that allows us to express a certain amount of personal freedom, but also create a stable material environment that society can exist in. That's why we have, rules and governments, because it provides stability. It's, so
In abundance.
responsible use of AI. That's something I see very positive. And the reason for that is that these machine learning programs right now are able to solve problems and make connections a lot faster than we can. And part of the reason is that we dump millions of internet interactions and data into chat GPT-3 in order to create and have the language processing model get much better. So, like, think of one human or even a team of humans who are just trying to aggregate that data themselves and pull out actionable insight. It's just not where we don't process in that same way. Maybe we could. Maybe the Neuralink can allow us to use our own brains as sort of processors for these big bits of information. But the computers can do that better. And so I actually think that we could have like an amazing dashboard of Earth that is like this is the predictions from machine learning based on hundreds of years of previous data on like environmental circumstances and energy production in different countries. We can make predictions about quotas that we need to be meeting, or because like I said, Earth is a closed system, so we got to like if the water's coming out here, we got to plug it here, but then it creates a pressure, and now
Yeah.
something else is going to feel that, and we have to balance it out in a way that presents growth and sustainability. So that's the positive use that I see from AI. The negative use that I think that we've already experienced is the sort of big tech in a world of capitalism and making a lot of money, basically throwing in massive amounts of user data, very personable user data, which we opt into. It's in
Yeah.
the agreement, although
Exactly.
none of us read it. And
Hmm.
so, as an individual, you do need to become responsible for what you're opting into and what you're actually giving up to use that free service. So we've seen the effects. We've seen these big social media companies in courts trying like having to explain what they've used this personal data for. And so you want an example of a singularity that happened that like nobody really knew about is that like over the years of the rise of these massive social medias, people sort of opted in and gave them all this personal information. And what happened was a sort of singularity where it's that we actually gave over a lot of influence to this data platform. And many people are influenced by these platforms, but they use a lot. They get a lot of their information about what's going on in the world from their social media platforms, and
Yeah.
so it provided an opportunity for manipulation. You know, technology and the internet, you can spread messages of truth. You can show the reality of what's going on in a third world country, and that can create a social movement that actually raises resources and enough enough human attention for somebody to go solve that problem or to force some of the higher up individuals to clean up their system and actually get out there. So that's a use for good. But yeah, the negativities that can come out of it is that we can also get a very distorted perception of reality because we're getting fed a sort of echo chamber, or we're being influenced because people are making pages and they want to change the way that another culture interacts with each other to set themselves
Exactly.
up for some sort of advantage. So all those things are within the realm of responsible technological use.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of variables to it, and then yeah, like you said, there's a lot of influence. Literally, they're called influencers, but where is the real influence coming from on these platforms? That's the thing. It's like how we use it, but it's also how the platforms are using us. And you can go down the conspiracy route and say there's powers that be that literally are pushing agendas. Who knows? I don't know. I don't have that much information. I don't know. But I know there's definitely agendas and certain narratives that are pushed on us easily, literally right in our face from these media companies. So that's where it can get dangerous. It's like being able to push certain information or certain narratives to us, and it could be good narratives. Definitely could be positive, but most likely, I don't know. There's not. I don't know. It just seems like it seems negative for the human species as a whole, like the influence and distraction that is pushed to the majority of the population. It seems negative. Is it on purpose? I don't know. I hope it's not. I hope we don't live in that kind of world. You know what I'm saying, man? I really hope we don't live in that kind of world. But sometimes I think we do. And as time goes on, as technology gets more incorporated in our life, more and more literally intertwined with our being, that influence is only going to get stronger too. So it's only going to bring people deeper and deeper and deeper into this so called matrix. And like I said, is it on purpose? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. That's up for all of us to decide to see if, and it really doesn't matter, honestly, that you get to a certain point of self exploration where I find where it doesn't matter if it is on purpose or not. I know what's happening. I know people are getting distracted from technology, from technology to find that inner kind of essence, right? Whatever it is, that time to have 10, 15 minutes of just meditation a day, whatever it is, and to get sucked into narratives and just pointless stuff. I know that's happening for sure, but it really doesn't matter at a certain point, right? Like you could go down like the Q rabbit hole, whatever, get sucked into like reptilian conspiracies. That might be true. That might be true. I hope it's not, but really it doesn't matter. There's a certain point where it's like all that one needs to know is that technology can act as a giant distraction, and the distractions vary, the narratives and agendas vary, but that really doesn't matter. I think one can just recognize that it can act as a giant distraction for us, but as long as you have that certain essence within oneself, a kind of practice for oneself to go within, that's all that matters. I think that's what we can get from this whole topic, right? Is that as time goes on, as the singularity approaches us, as we get sucked more and more into this technological leviathan, um, it becomes ever more so important to go within and to be able to find that semblance of humanness, because it seems like we're losing our humanity, this true like divine essence that was created maybe from God, one could say, like this true spiritual essence. It almost seems like technology is taking that away from us. And I think what's sad is it does have the potential to really further that and spread the good word. It really does. But I think unfortunately, I do believe that there are dark forces that are swaying us away from that. So recognize that. All I have to say is recognize that there may be some distractions, some influences. Don't get sucked into trying to figure out who it is or what it is, because I think that's just another aspect of the matrix, is confusion and chaos. Create confusion and chaos. Just recognize it for what it is, and then know what you don't need in order to know what you need to go within. That's my only advice to anybody listening to this, but I'm probably preaching to the choir to anybody listening to this. If they have listened to this podcast this long, you probably already know the deal. Like this technology, all of this is a distraction. All of this is a distraction. It's only getting more and more intense as time goes on. But use that distraction to know what you don't need in order to know what one needs to go within. Find that God within, man, and that's it. That'll lead the way. No matter how linked up we are to the technology, or the technology is linked up to us. But yeah, man, it's like you said, how we use it. That's all how we use it. Because I mean, I'm probably gonna get a Neuralink. I'm probably gonna get it hooked up to my brain, right? Like most likely, unless I become a monk, like most likely, as time goes on, I'm gonna get sucked more and more in as well. So I don't know. Are you on the train of being intertwined with this technology, like getting it into, if you get the microchip right in your arm, but it gives you powers, it gives you certain kind of way to control computers in your house. Imagine if you could just turn your lights on, like you just point at it, or you think about your lights, or you think about like turning music on. You literally just think about music and it turns on. Like you certain song, you think about Journey, right? And it plays your favorite Journey song. You don't even have to say, Alexa, play Journey. You think of it. And other things like that, other capabilities that technology will grant us when it's connected to our mind, right? It's tempting. It's definitely tempting. So are you on that train? Would you want to be involved with that?
So yeah, here's how I try to think about it. So they call that the Internet of Things, and it's only going to get more complicated. Right? There's a sort of running, joke in the tech community where it's like, everything has Wi-Fi now. My toaster is a Wi-Fi. I can like talk to Alexa through my refrigerator and order groceries. And so, look, I'm not against the idea of decreasing the barrier to interact with these tools. As somebody who is interested in like logic, precision, expertise, and tools that can make things and processes go faster, like I like when things are done right. I love thinking about how to do things better. I love figuring out how to master not only my inner environment, but also my exterior environment. So look, if the AR goggles or the AR glasses are easier and better to use than my phone, then, I'll do it. But I also need the off switch. I want,
exactly.
It's about how much you're giving over, because, your phone even, it's on silent. And you're right. the easier we make technology to access, there's going to be a certain amount of people that are then going to use that as an opportunity to like never turn it off. Because right now, because your
Mm,
phone is like a separate thing, it's like there's some natural circumstances where it's like if you don't physically have your phone with you because you left it downstairs, you're not going to be, it's not going to have your attention.
exactly.
But now we decrease that barrier, and there's a more, it's the opportunity to have your attention is much easier to get,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we need to introduce the mindfulness process
Yeah.
and your own, seeking for sure something more to have a meaningful and joyful experience. um, that's where that needs to be introduced. So whenever people talk about these dystopian possibilities with technology, I always think about how can I take more personal responsibility for how I utilize these tools.
Yeah.
And that allows me to have optimism. That allows me to use the technology without rage quitting. Because I myself had a phase where I call it the indie, anyone who's into like who's like indie or something, they all have this phase where it's like they'll like turn off social media completely because they just get like bummed. They feel the attention crisis that's happening.
Yeah.
They get into that scroll mindset, and like it
Scroll
amplifies their
mindset.
anxiety, and they realize that it's just like it's taking their thoughts off of maybe the uncomfortability of doing nothing.
Yeah.
And it actually creates it actually does, it creates a change in our neurosystems, in our
Mm,
nervous systems
mm,
are reacting at this pace that technology goes. And so what's weird is actually like if you think if you want to personify technology, like these computers are over here just like doing their thing, chugging along. They're like, this is great. Oh, we got this human over here. They think a little different. They're kind of slower. But what's happening is that we as humans, we're looking at Mr. or Mrs. Computer, and we're like, I want to think that fast. And so we literally scroll. We do everything faster. We do this. We're like, wow, I can multitask. And then it's like, no, that's not how the human brain computer is set up. It's a little bit different. You shouldn't try to multitask like a computer with four apps open at once. You shouldn't try and watch. Some people think productivity is like if I could read a book two times faster, like that means I'm being like 2x more productive. But
yeah.
like you got to measure how much time did I get to think about the content that was in the book.
Mm, mm-hmm.
How much time do when you're reading it yourself, you have time to stop and think. You reread the last paragraph. And so the speed of your thoughts is also like massive in meditation, because especially a sensory deprivation tank, like I said, you're getting in that sort of like that exact mirror, and you're like, oh my God, it's literally just me and I can't stand it. That's why people are afraid to get in that tank.
Yeah.
It's literally just me and I can't stand it. And that is a recipe for the sort of modern disaster that we get.
Mm,
And that's why mindfulness is the antithesis to this sort of like hustle culture, overly technologically focused. Um, so yeah, it's the tools, and it's how much personal responsibility we take on how to use them. And you can find a balance. You got to become a master balancer. As the complexity of civilization increases, so does our possibility for expansion and to create more stable environments. But also, we can really derail our focus if we don't take personal responsibility for what we put human attention to.
mm-hmm. Amen, man. Well said. Well said. It's all up to us. Truly, it's up to us. We have free will. Every single one of us. We have free will. It might be dwindling as time goes on, but I think no matter what, we have free will. As long as we call ourselves human, we have the ability to choose what we use and make sure it doesn't use us. Um, it's up to us, man. Like we started this whole thing. It's not an accident that the yogis came over in the '60s and brought us this. It's almost like they knew. They almost prophesized this world, this technological, chaotic, confusing world that we're moving toward of go, 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 high efficiency, all right now, right here and now. Go, 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 fast. It's almost like they came over Slow us down. Bring us into a slower state of mind to just be here now and be with yourself. I don't think it's an accident.
Yeah, I think it's probably amazing foresight, and it
Yeah.
probably actually comes from understanding the long history of the past. I've heard some interesting stories about the origin of yoga, and some of these philosophers like Patanjali, who wrote the sort of Eightfold Path, and some other like yogic texts.
As a
And
sutras.
like I guarantee you, those were masterful individuals that saw the problems in the world and like really took full 100% responsibility of like, how do I act as a mind, body, and spirit within this chaotic environment? How do I rein in the controls? Because I do think that from a spiritual perspective, from like a core consciousness perspective, um, we all desire some sort of like stability and beauty. And, there's traits that go beyond just the animal programming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just based on some of my philosophical perspectives on the nature of life after death, human personality, human ego. What is the body? Is the mind possible of existing without the body? What's the purpose of energy systems? Our body is just sleeves that our consciousness expresses through. This is tons more topic, and I don't know how much we want to dive into that, on this session. But that's also a train of thought that I'm very interested in. Afterlife, out of body experiences. Um, that's so it's so fascinating, and it really ties in with look. We talk about, would I take on technology, as it becomes more accessible? Would I get a Neuralink? I'm not even thinking about those things, because from what I see is that humans are so much more capable than we realize. And
Yeah. Exactly.
everyone has that phrase, we only use 10% of our brain capacity, or there's junk DNA that we don't think it's used for anything. But in these alternative communities, they say, no, that is it's basically unactivated potential from your evolutionary, from the long evolutionary history of humanity. Some people even say, we used to have telepathy, but we lost it because we didn't use it. Don't use it, lose it, mentality.
Yeah.
And so it's like, uh, yeah, I mean, all these amazing things are possible, especially when it comes to human potential. Out of body experience is one of the crazy ones. Read Robert Monroe's books. He's like a guy who grew up in America, Western thinking, business owner who started having like spontaneous out of body experiences in his like 50s or 60s. And like his books right through his process of what that was like for him, and discovering that and realizing that this was a repeatable phenomenon that actually did connect to the real world. It wasn't just a hallucination. Like, talk about human potential. Those stories are amazing. The practices, that field of personal progression and consciousness exploration is fascinating. So I don't know, wherever you want to go off of that.
Yeah, we can definitely go off of that, man. How much time do you have?
I mean, I'm not on a schedule. I don't have to do something next.
Okay.
I don't know how long you normally make your episodes go for.
Dude, I can go. I can talk whenever. Usually it's like, I don't know. It depends on the person, but we already kind of know each other, so I think we can talk a lot. I don't have any schedule either, but I think that's a good topic to touch on, right? We can
Yeah,
transition into
it
that, right?
it could be for another episode though.
Mm,
Consciousness experiences. This we had a pretty good focused conversation. You're talking about
that's
AI
true.
and personal responsibility. So
Yeah,
um,
might have to leave
that
people on a
was a good
cliffhanger.
one. Yeah,
That's a cliffhanger, though. Ultimately, yeah, there's more than meets the eye to the human condition. Whether you're talking about the future in terms of the technology that is going to be granted to us, or literally, yeah, out of body experiences and what happens after we die. There's a lot more going on than Fox News and CNN will tell you, that's for sure. And it's really up to all of us to be able to find that, man. Like, true spirituality is just, in my opinion, going within, figuring out that we really have no idea. Like, we don't know what it means to be a human being. There's stories, and school will teach you history and biology, but that's only the tip of the iceberg, man. Once you start to go within and follow this certain path, It's almost endless, right? The human potential, like you said, is almost endless, and that's what I live for, man. That's what I think it's being human is about, is figuring out what the hell this is. What is all this? What the hell this is? What am I? What are you? What is this life altogether? I don't know, man. It's an endless journey, you know. In yoga, they say forever the student. That's how I truly feel every day I wake up. I'm like, what am I gonna learn today about myself? Where am I gonna go? Where am I gonna take this? It's interesting. It's definitely an interesting way to live. But yeah, man, we go beyond the body. Whether you wanna talk about like how technology is gonna get intertwined with us, ultimately, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. ultimately, ultimately, we are already in a sort of singularity. We are already in a sort of simulation, just being in this humanly vessel. I believe this is the greatest computer that is ever devised, that God created for us. It's called the human. Welcome, you're in it, and we have powers that go beyond one's imagination. We truly do. And we're just at the point right now where we're figuring out those powers, right? I think maybe we did have them in the past. Maybe at one point we did have telepathy and we were able to build the pyramids with sound. Maybe at one point that was true. We lost that though. It does seem like we devolved into a materialistic state, but I think at this point in time, it's very cool, man. We're living through like a renaissance where it's like we have the materialism and the technology evolving and developing ever more so exponentially, but then also, yes, within ourselves we are evolving and finding this kind of like spiritual technology that at one time we seem to have been a part of, right? Like I said, almost like the golden age of Atlantis and in Lemuria, like those civilizations, those stories, those archetypes seem to have that kind of technology, not really in the sense of like the materialistic technology, but that spiritual technology. And it seems like we're at a point where those two worlds are coming together and we're creating this weird symbiosis between the two. And who knows where it's going to go, man? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to say the least. But yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else to say. Do you got any last words for the world before we wrap this thing up?
Find the adventure in it all,
Mm,
and use these tools to change your perspective, the conscious perspective.
there it
Integrate,
is.
find the adventure. If you can go back to that childlike theta state of learning, before you before you feel like life turned into 1984, whatever dystopian book you wanna apply
Exactly.
to the current world status is like. No, you're here, and there's a lot to discover.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's do it.
Let's do it. Stay wondrous. Stay wondrous and revere the mystery. That's what I like to say. But yeah, other than that, thanks for anybody that listened this long. Thank you, Tyler. Taychilla. What do you want to go by on the podcast?
I mean, you can just say Taylor. You can link my social,
Oh
Taychilla
yeah,
for
I
sure.
called you Taylor, not
You
Tyler.
said Tyler.
Sorry, man. Damn.
Yeah,
I know you in my brain, literally, dude, as Taychilla. I don't know why. Like that's like
yeah.
when I think of you, you're Taychilla.
It is like a
But
very natural name. Like when I came up with that in high school, like people picked it up. They just started calling me that because it's kind of catchy and it does match the personality. This, yeah.
well, you are Taychilla forever to me in my subconscious. So thank you for coming on here, man. Appreciate your time, effort, and wisdom. And yeah, tune in for the next one. Tune in for part two, everybody. I think it's gonna be a good one. Out of body. Going out of body on that one. Peace.